I reverted back to reporting because we were online and they needed as many reporters as they could. So they made me kind of an animal welfare reporter. I was doing a lot of coyote coverage and dogs that were being starved by their owners. It was a bit of a tragic beat, but people really ate it up. And then I moved on to cars and covering the auto culture here in Southern California. And eventually made my way to the business team. I was first their presentation editor. I had a great institutional knowledge of the business scene here in Orange County in Southern California. So I made my way to deputy business editor, and a year and a half ago I became the business editor of the paper, and it's been an amazing ride ever since. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. And before we get into some prepared questions, can I ask you, what is it about the Orange County Register that made you feel at home all these years?
You know, I have to say I'm a Navy brat, and I moved my whole life into college. You know, and college is also something of a period in life where you're moving all the time. And I came here after South Florida, and I think it was a little bit of this paradise of Southern California. It's very addictive. The food here is diverse and amazing. The people are very diverse. And the jobs at the paper kept changing for me. And that perhaps was a key thing in my life, was if I got bored, I could switch my role. And the managers here were very keen to help me with those changes. So I think that's pretty much what's grounded me here. I had a daughter 5 years ago, so that'll also kind of keep you in place. But I do enjoy living here. I have a very big village of friends, and you know, California is a place that suits me well, perhaps in my perspective.
Fair enough. And you're no, I'm from LA myself, so
you get it.
Now, you're the business editor of obviously one of the most read newspapers in the U.S. Can you walk us through your audience and addressing their business needs?
I will say that in today's newspaper world and news cycle, it's a very diverse audience. I'll begin by saying it's pretty much two audiences, maybe even more. We have our core print reader audience. They tend to be older, more conservative, very passionate about their newspaper. And then we have our online audience, which can be global. I remember when I was doing animal welfare, I covered a story on a dog that had been starved almost to death. And the story ran on our local cover. And I was getting email and phone calls from Japan, from Germany, all over the world. People were reacting to the story. And that was an eye-opening experience to me as a reporter and a journalist, that when you put your stories online, they are everywhere and people read them. And something about Southern California tends to draw a lot of people in. I think we have a hugely transient audience here. They live here, they move, but they don't lose their sense of California. So we get a lot of people in our online audience that want news from Southern California, either just to stay informed or to pick on us. We have a big rivalry with Texas. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but we, you know, are constantly writing about people moving to Texas, people moving back, businesses moving to Texas. I have a columnist, John Lansner, who writes about this quite often, because the numbers, you know, it's very anecdotal. People want to talk about this great shift between the two states when it's actually really small. But it gives you an idea of, we have people reading us from everywhere. We've got them on Facebook, on Twitter, on our homepage. It's just a very diverse audience. Keeping up with them can be something of a challenge sometimes too.
You know, that's what I was going to ask, because as you mentioned, you have your traditional audience, the newspaper audience, and it makes sense that they're a little older, maybe a little more traditional Orange County conservative. And then you have, of course, your digital audience, and then if you throw in the social media, then
right. It's game on. It's everywhere, and the audience is very, I would say, insatiable. They want a lot of news, and they don't always like what we write. Lately, I would say some of the pressure points in the coverage have been our high housing costs and our economy. And the economy has been really strong in California. The first quarter of 2017, however, we saw a clear slowing in job growth and wages and several other key indicators. And as we started writing this, we started to get a lot of pushback, either pushback or people agreeing with us, because misery loves company, right? So we had a lot of people on Facebook and Twitter kind of zinging back and forth on our stories. And we try to keep, in mind the vast perspective out there. You have a lot of wealth in Southern California, and you have a lot of poverty as well. And the poverty is a new term for us because you don't think about the poor as much in Orange County. However, the poor is growing more into the middle class because our cost of living is so high. So those have given us some really great headlines that get the audience engaged, either on the phone, really yelling at me and our reporters, or on social media where they can say whatever they want very freely and with, I have to say, a lot of hate and vehemence. So
that sounds charming.
Yeah, there was a time in our online world where we moderated all our comments, but most newspapers are using Facebook to engage in a commenting scene, and it's really hard. We get in as a group. The whole newsroom will participate in highlighting the serious trolls out there and try to curb that audience. But for the most part, we let them self-moderate because people will take the ugly to task in a heartbeat. But this goes to show you what our day looks like. It's not just creating stories. Sometimes it's moderating. Sometimes it's listening to the commenters.
Before we continue, I just want to remind audience members that you can definitely throughout this event submit questions through GoToWebinar, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end. Samantha, how much do you and your team how important is geography to a story? You mentioned that you have a local audience, then you have an international. How do you do
Right. Well, an interesting thing happened here for us a year ago. We were bought out of bankruptcy, and it was a big story in the industry world. We had owners with us for a few years that spent a lot of money on our print edition, and it didn't work, as you can imagine. So we retrenched. We got new owners. Our company is owned by Digital First Media. So that gives you the first clue about our MO these days, is digital first. It's a very large company owned by a hedge fund manager out of New York. We have the Denver Post, the Mercury News, the Orange County Register. In Southern California, we created what's called the Southern California News Group, and it's real important for any of you in PR to note this, because I am not just one newspaper anymore. There are 11 of us, so I have 10 sister papers in my community here in Southern California, and that has also changed somewhat our coverage. We will look at our real estate coverage, our economic coverage, our jobs coverage, even retail from a regional perspective. So I'm very lucky to have reporters that are on those very key subjects. And just a week ago, we wrote a big piece. Jeff Collins, our real estate reporter, one of 3 real estate reporters here, wrote about eviction. And real estate is probably the number 1, number 2 subject in Southern California right now. So he wrote about actual declining numbers in evictions, but we didn't just write it for Orange County. We wrote it for the 4-county region that we cover, and that's LA County, Orange County, San Bernardino County, and Riverside County. So that is a tremendous audience potential. We had to write that story 2 different ways. One that kind of focused on Orange County and a lot of voices, because we are based in Orange County, so we talk to a lot of Orange County people. But we then reached out to peers and colleagues to get the reach into those other counties so that the story would engage those readers in those areas. Because for us to assume we know what's going on in San Bernardino County would be foolhardy. We don't. We live here. We work here. So we use our sister papers to help us broaden our coverage, which has been an asset for sure. It also helps us, and it will help your clients to know that we have an audience that is not just the 3 million people in Orange County. We actually have several papers in LA County and several more in the Inland Empire, as we call it.
Now, Orange County, as you mentioned, there's obviously a discrepancy. However, Orange County has a really strong economy with the biotech. You've got gaming like Blizzard
Right.
Entertainment and of course Disney and so many things. Are there certain industries that you, in addition to real estate, of course, that you tend to focus on a little bit more?
We will. I will say, as the team has shrunk over the years with the industry contraction, that we've had to focus a little bit more when news comes around. We just did a big sit down with the CEO of Ingram Micro, because Ingram Micro is based here in Orange County, and it's a global distributor and logistics company. It's probably one of the #1 in the world, and they happen to be here. But they were bought recently by an offshore company, and we wanted to know, how much is that changing you? So we did, ask the CEO, are you willing to sit down? And he said yes. So we got a really nice interview with him, and we do try to look at, what's happening here, what's growing, what's moving. Broadcom was a big chip maker here in Orange County, bought by Avago, and their headquarters is now San Jose. They still have 1,000 people here in Orange County, so we care about them, but we've noticed that our connectivity to that company has changed. And in the past, we would try to reach out to those CEOs and do more interviews with them, but they're not here and they're not as accessible. So we shift. We have Disney here. They're also very limited in their media engagement. They're very wise that way. They give us what they want to give us. So sometimes we have to circumvent and interview people around them, which is where sometimes clients out in the PR world come in handy, because they can offer insight on these industry titans, and that's what we need. It doesn't really matter where you're based. If you specialize in amusement parks, we probably want to talk to your analyst. We probably want to talk to someone who's written a book about this, because they may have industry insight that we haven't touched on. So it's a bit of a game for us in terms of how, with our 5-6 staff members, can we touch on some of these big companies. We just did a story I'm going to run this Sunday on Karma Automotive, and Karma Automotive used to be Fisker Automotive, and it's an upstart electric hybrid car maker that's revived its car out in Moreno Valley, so in Riverside County. So we had a Riverside County reporter go out there and do that, but I have my reporter here kind of recrafting that story a little bit, so it has a little bit more of the Orange County hook, because they're based here in Orange County. So I find it fascinating that we now have an automaker based in Orange County. So we're trying to make some inroads there, no pun intended.
Yeah, it's a very, I've heard from businesses that it's a really great place to do business. I mean, the infrastructure, the new build, there's a lot going on, obviously.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through your department? What does your permanent team look like? Do you rely on freelancers, photographers,
yeah.
etc.?
Let me tell you a little bit about that. We have, here at the Register, I have 6 people on my team, not counting the photographers that support us. I have a freelancer who writes our briefs because we can't get to every single item. And I think that's been a niche for us, that we were able to get promotions, new ventures, transactions for real estate. We get those in the paper, and I don't have to tax my reporters to stop their day to write a transactional brief. I have a freelancer who does that. We used to have a staffer who did it, but they pulled her into a social media role. So that shows you how newsrooms are evolving. And we have an economy reporter who does jobs and issues that relate to jobs, interesting people in the economy. I have a columnist, John Lansner, who spins on everything from In-N-Out Burgers to who's moving to Texas. I have a retail and restaurant reporter, too, retail reporter Hannah Madden, and I have a restaurant reporter, Nancy Luna, who pretty much branded herself 10 years ago as the fast food maven, and her audience is vast, and I would say nationwide. We have several big fast food chains based here in Orange County. Del Taco and Taco Bell come to mind. We have BJ's Restaurants and several other operators who are here. And then I have 3 real estate reporters, one who's kind of part-time because she's a web editor on the weekends. Jeff Collins, who does the deep dives for us and does a lot of the heavy analysis on people and the issues in real estate. So it's a big, for our size newspaper, it's a fairly big business staff. I used to have 3 times that many people. but they get pulled into other roles, which is good for the newspaper. We want to keep everybody active. We also reach out to our peers in the Southern California News Group, because if I add up everybody who might touch on an industry or business story, the team probably swells to 15 again. We have a reporter who does ports and transportation. She's based at the Long Beach Press-Telegram. And we have one of our reporters who does transpo issues specifically for Orange County, but she's not on my team. And then we have people in the Inland Empire that cover the big box companies out there and the logistics firms. So the team is bigger than just Orange County.
Okay, wow, that is a pretty extensive team. Well, speaking of the team, when folks, on the line are reaching out, should they reach out to you or a specific member of the team, depending on what they're trying to do, or what's the best way to reach out?
Well, I do like to keep tabs on my team. Don't tell them that. But sometimes the press releases will come through and people will discard them. I have a good example for you. There was one that came through several people a few days ago on a new concept startup in San Diego that is now, or maybe Los Angeles, but they're expanding into Orange County and San Diego, and it's a Tesla commuter company where you pay to ride in a Tesla that's driven from point A to point B, and you pay a subscription fee to do that. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? So I passed it on to my bosses and said, we might want to do a bigger transportation story, what the commuter world of 2025 will look like, say. But in the meantime, I didn't want to leave that story hanging, so I sent it to my general assignment reporter, Hannah Madden, who also does retail. And she did some poking around, and she came running over to my desk, and she said, if I'm reading this correctly, when I researched this startup was created by a kid who hasn't graduated from high school yet.
Wow.
So I said, okay, let's back up a little bit. Let's see who's funding him. He must have rich family or rich investors. I don't know if this is one Tesla, if he has 50 Teslas. So immediately that press release went from a concept to a curiosity to, wow, this could be a great story. And it might have gone right past all of us, but we started looking into it. So I would say always loop the editor in at any institution you're dealing with, even on a CC, so that it kind of hits the radar. People are always on vacation, the time of year, keep that in mind. We just met yesterday as a team. I bought them pastry to bribe them to bring me good story ideas for the summer, because my team's going to start disappearing next week. And I think from June through end of July, I'm going to have people on vacation. So I want to be able to stack the stories up. If you're emailing these people while they're gone, they may not forward it to me. So I always kind of ask people to find the editor. We don't mind you incessantly emailing us, really, because that's sometimes the only way to get our attention. Don't forget about me. I'm still here. And it's a busy, frantic world sometimes, and we tend to take a breath on Monday and Tuesday, providing the news world isn't imploding. So those are really good days to get us. I would say Monday and Tuesday are slower in terms of news cycle. So if you get us then, maybe more attention span.
A pretty general question just came in asking how key travel industry stories are to you and your team.
Excuse me, I haven't had enough coffee. Industry travel. Well, we do have a travel section, I will say. And then in terms of industry, we have written about private aviation companies here. We have written about groups that specify in incoming tourists, like our Asian tourism here is enormous, and it's a huge part of tourism in California. So if you're talking like stories like that, we're keenly interested in what's happening, but it should have impact on our community. So if it's a national or global trend, it depends. We have a lot of money in California. We travel perhaps unlike a lot of other states in the country. It's not uncommon to talk to people who are coming back from global travel and deep into Asia. We've had a lot of people venturing out even farther into the Middle East. Dubai is a popular hotspot. people want to shop and spend their money. So if you have insight that really hits home for Southern California, then we're probably interested in it.
Okay. Do you think, I mean, you mentioned that the Orange County Register is now owned by a company that's very focused on the digital side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago this was all a shock, but obviously there's no shock anymore. So the question is, does traditional media exist anymore?
You know, I say yes, because we have our very dedicated core subscribers who are hanging on tooth and nail. They are older, they are conservative. For the most part, we do have a mix in Orange County, I would say. We are changing and evolving. I've seen that happen in my 17 years here. But they are very dedicated. I get the calls because they somehow think the business editor also deals with the business end of newspapers. So I get a lot of subscribers who, I've subscribed to the paper for 35 years. I get a lot of that. And they're either disappointed because their paper didn't land, their paper landed and got wet, or their rates are going up, which is a big issue right now for a lot of subscribers. Longtime subscribers are seeing their subscription rates rise. And in Orange County, it's kind of a complex situation. We have money, but we have a lot of seniors on fixed income who are retiring in place in their homes. So I think that they are a good part of our audience. It's still more than half of our income and our revenues come from that print edition. We have a team now dedicated to growing our digital advertising. We have a company called Ad Taxi that Digital First Media owns, and they're trying to broaden the scope of digital advertising on a global sense. So I don't think traditional is gone yet. I don't know. Funny, I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and when I was there, I won't say when, but it was funny that my professors were telling me that newspapers would be dead in 10 to 15 years. And I can tell you that we're way past that deadline, and the papers seem to hang on. And I don't know how much longer that traditional media has, but while it's there, we're continuing to, put our best work in both places, both digital and traditional.
You know, it's so interesting doing these events because obviously we get to talk to a number of members of the media, and it seems like sort of really traditional media, like newspapers, are going through that conundrum for the most part, and then you have magazines which thought they wouldn't have to, and now they are, and it seems like the only publications that really couldn't care less have a built-in audience, like certain newsletters, in-flight magazines, that kind of thing.
Yes. Niche seems to be the place to be. We do have several magazines here at the Register, and they are very niche focused. We have a golf magazine, and it's golf, and the magazine team sits right next to me. So now I get to hear them booking out their sections and dealing with their deadlines. We have Coast magazine, which deals with our very affluent coastal communities, and then we have OC Family, and that's obviously all about family. And we had more at one time, but we quickly realized we've got to go with where the money is and where people will pay. And I don't know how much longer they're around. We also, in the newspaper realm, a new thing that has probably been around for 5 years, maybe less, is where your subscribers pay a certain amount for your newspaper, and then they pay a bonus amount, we would call it a bonus, that includes a monthly magazine. It comes in their paper. Beyond our traditional magazine. So we're right now working on our Best of Orange County edition, and that will go in the September newspaper. And it's a big, thick book, and we poll our community, and we say, what's the best restaurant? What's the best grocery store? What's the best tire dealer? And that's a big magazine, and so our subscribers will pay for that, but it's a premium product for them. So newspapers are trying to be creative about how we deliver that kind of content. Rather than just dole it out every week or every Sunday, we will put it in a premium product and sell it on newsstands, but also give it to our subscribers. And there's Varsity Sports is done that way. We will do a Christmas and shopping guides. We have our top workplaces that comes out in December that the business team is responsible for. So there is still niche product out there, and there is still a lot of need for niche news. So I say to anyone who has a client out there, niche is important. Just remember if the audience will match the niche.
We have another question that just came in, pretty general, but I think it'd be nice to touch upon it.
Yeah.
Hi there. What are some of Samantha's favorite story ideas?
Well, I am a voracious consumer of news, so it's not just about business for me. It's everything. And this transportation story was one that I pitched after I saw this pitch from this startup, because I was recently a moderator on an economics panel here in Orange County, and one of the panelists is Lucy Dunn, who happens to be on the State Transportation Committee. And she said something very fascinating to me, which was a question from the audience asked, when are we going to get mass transit fixed here in California? Because it's a big problem in many suburban communities like Orange County. We're sprawling and the buses take forever and they're expensive. And Lucy Dunn's response was, well, in 20 years there won't be any buses. And we were all a little stunned. And she said, look at what Uber and Lyft are doing. They are taking ride sharing and dispersing it across every community with thousands of drivers. There are 8,000 Uber drivers right now in Orange County. Do you know how many taxi drivers we have? 600. And that number has completely flipped upside down. So the theory is that, and Uber and Lyft recently subsidized a couple cities to help move seniors to their appointments, and it's a free service. So she's projecting, and others are projecting, that transportation in the future will be all about this ride-sharing service, that it'll be electric, it'll be automated, you will hail a car, you will get in the car, it will take you there, it will be either subsidized or it will be so cheap because the competition is so dense. So I liked us writing a story about what does the future of transportation look like. That's something I, as a consumer and a resident here, want to know. I love the idea of us evolving in California that way. I also one of the headlines I really want to get into, and I can't seem to get Costco to respond to us, but as big box retailers start to fade, like Macy's and Sears and JCPenney, who's really standing out? Target, maybe, Costco. So I would love to get to the Costco regional manager in Southern California, or a few of them, and talk to them about how they continue to thrive, even with their small margin. We all love our Costcos here, and anyone can attest to that if you dare go on a Saturday. So those are kind of some of the stories that I'm fascinated with. Also, housing is important to me because I'm a parent, and I wonder what will happen with my child as she grows up in this community. Will she be able to stay here? Will she have to move to another part of the state or out of the state? Who knows? So I could go on and on about stories I'd love to see, but I don't think we have enough time.
Orange County is getting really expensive, isn't it?
Yes, I'll get to some of the analytics if you guys are interested in our business reach. In the month of May, our business team had 1.4 million views from 794,000 visitors. That was in 1 month. We had 200 posts, so that's from 200 posts, we generated 1.4 million views. It may not have been one of our strongest months. It was a vacationing month, and kind of, the news cycle tends to slow down as we get near a holiday like Memorial Day. Our top viewed story of the month was this headline: $84,000 a year now qualifies as low income in Orange County.
Wow.
And yes, so think about that. That's a HUD qualification. We had recently seen our peers at the Mercury News in San Jose write about how it was 125. So just up in the Bay Area, that's their low income threshold. And so Jeff Collins wrote this story, but this gives you an idea of what it's like to live in Orange County. Our average rents here are around $1,800 a month, and that's for a one-bedroom apartment. So if you can imagine trying to be a family here renting, we did another headline: the average rental rate for a house in Orange County is $3,000. So if you want to rent a house in Orange County with your family, you better have two incomes or a substantial single income. So these are some of the things that are happening here. We've also done the what you have to earn to rent a home here, and it's around $28 a month. It depends on where you're renting. It swells to as much as $32 an hour. $28 an hour to $32 an hour it needs to be to rent an average apartment. So that's a very high income where we have thousands upon thousands of people here who make minimum wage, and they need to work 2 to 3 jobs and live 2 to 3 deep in their apartment to make the rent.
You know, that's what I was about to ask you before we move on.
Yeah.
Up in the Bay Area, you have a big exodus. So either you have
Yes.
people living 5 to an apartment, or if you have a single family earning 35, 40K and they don't want to deal with it, they'll move to the Central Valley. But then obviously
Right.
that in turn creates a traffic problem and a mess for everybody involved. So is
Right.
a similar thing happening in Orange County, for example, people moving to, let's say, the Inland Empire?
Correct. We are finding they're not necessarily leaving the state. They are leaving the county, and they are moving to the Inland Empire where real estate is significantly less expensive. But that is creating a huge nightmare on our freeways. As you can imagine, commuter traffic here is a nightmare. And if you're already in a budget crunch, you're not necessarily going to get on the Metrolink train, which has a limited function. So we do see quite a bit of commuter hell in Southern California. And I think what's interesting to me as an editor and a consumer is that some businesses have been very reluctant to allow their people to telecommute. Now, some businesses you just can't. It's a hands-on job and you have to be there. But I'm somewhat surprised when I hear people telling me that they have an office job in Irvine where they sit at a desk all day online. And to me, that's an easy solution for that employer, but it's going to take some time to convince employers that they can do that and still get productivity. When I work from home, I can tell you my productivity goes sky high because I start much earlier in the day, and I tend to linger at the end of the day because the computer doesn't have to shut down while I'm cooking dinner. So we are seeing a lot of that happen, and I'm curious. We had PIMCO is based in Newport Beach, the bond trader, and they recently had a report out that said they're anticipating a recession by 2022. So if you guys are interested in that, we have, and my columnist John Lansner says it's probably sooner than 2022. He's projecting we'll have some slump in the next 4 years. So, but a slump can be a very bad thing, obviously. People lose their jobs, and you end up with fewer people on the roads, which is great for the people who are employed, but you end up with a whole different set of problems.
You know, you've mentioned a number of statistics throughout this event. So is it fair to say that in addition to sort of company-specific events, that statistics, data, studies, things like that are potentially interesting?
Very much so. I think in our busy pace, anytime we can get good data, I will say, because we will have people run the data and find that we had a story recently from Zillow, and they sent us this data set, and we just didn't like the data set at all. And the reporter got on the phone with their analyst and researcher and asked for more input on where did this come from. And it turned out we ended up using a more customized data set because, we're looking at a very specific swath. If you come to us and say that the rent here in Orange County averages $2,200, we're going to blink and say, no, it doesn't. We have a really strong data companies, and that's what they specialize in. CoreLogic is a key analyst of housing data for us, and we trust their data, and we know where they're getting it from. So data has to be a good set. It has to come from researchers that we understand and trust. There is a big problem right there for media today with trusted sources and fake news. So we're being extra cautious and vetting our sources. So in light of headlines, we certainly want to know what's happening in Southern California. We certainly want to know what's happening with jobs and the economy in California in general. But if you're going to send me data, just make sure you're willing to give me a full report. We've had some companies tell us, well, we can only give you this part of the report. Well, we're probably not going to take it then. We want full access because we're going to have readers asking us, where did you get this and how deep does it go? So that's important to note if you're going to be sending out information.
And does your department rely on an editorial calendar, or how do you go about planning?
Well, we did have our staff meeting yesterday because it's summer, and I was getting a little freaked out that I wouldn't have stories. And my role includes the daily newspaper, which we used to have a standalone business section every day of the week. Then as the industry tightened, we went to a page and a half in the news section Monday through Saturday. And on Sunday, I have two sections, a business section and a real estate section. So that's two covers and two inside sections that I have to book with reporters. So it's a lot of storytelling, and some of it I rely on from our wire services and from our group, Southern California News Group, and then it's my team. So I really like to sit down with them either on an individual level or as a group so that we can hear what everybody's writing about. One of my reporters, Margot Roosevelt, is writing about overtime, and there are some bills in our legislature dealing with overtime and thresholds for overtime. So she's writing a story on overtime. And another reporter today, Nancy, who works in the food industry, got a headline that Chipotle is now being accused of not paying overtime to millions of people that work in its chain. So, yes, so she said right away, because she knew Margot's working on overtime, does she have this? So, that's why we meet together as a group, so that we have a clear vision on what everybody's working on. And we try to go at least 2 weeks out, if not a month out. And the more time I have and the more time a reporter has, because we still have daily headlines that we have to deal with, in addition to our analysis or our long-form stories that go out on Sunday. Sunday is when we have the most time. So if you've heard me talk about Tesla, or you've heard me talk about jobs, and you've heard me talk about retail, and you have clients out there who deal with this, then you could pitch and say, listen, we have an analyst or we have a guy in New York who all he does is look at the retail scene. You should put him on your roster of experts. And know that it may not happen this week, but we are going to be writing about retail forever because that's what our audience wants. And we find that it's a key segment of our life that people want more information about. So we are booking constantly, but I usually ask the PR reps out there to give us a little bit of time because the day is busy.
We have a question about B2B type stories, business to business. In other words, obviously, if there's a story or a trend that involves consumers, such as retail, it's easy to sell it to a broader audience. But how do you look at stories that are very in the supply chain? Let's put it that way.
I would say that one thing that really helps us get hooked into that story is a real person example. If you can give me something, we have a lot of companies that are based here and deal with B2B, and on the outside, the bigger story is probably less interesting to me if I don't have real people giving me their experience in that chain. So if there's a person or someone that can be highlighted as, hey, I've got a local person who's franchising in this segment. This is a piece of the industry that's really moving hard this year. Maybe you'd be interested in talking to him. That's going to catch my interest because it's a person, it's a name, it's someone we can go and interview, take photographs of, and quickly turn that story around and have the background of the bigger supply chain as our context. So, sometimes those take us a little bit longer to do. Hannah Maddens, who's our general assignment reporter, gets tossed a lot of these stories, and sometimes it takes us a month or two, to be honest, to get them finalized because she's on stories every day. So I sent her home. I said, work from home today, get your bigger story. We're doing a story on the bargain thrift store and how the thrift stores are really doing well. Even in spite of a surging economy, we love our bargains. So I said, you need to go home and write that. So she gets a lot of these story assignments, and it's just a timing game. We have to kind of figure out when we can get them done. But give me people. People make a difference.
People make a difference. I like that.
Yeah.
We're almost done here. We have 3 minutes left. Thank you so much for your time. You're obviously, I can only imagine how busy you are, but is there anything you'd like to add in the couple of minutes that we have left here, Samantha?
Well, I'll go back to my pitch on people and local. Great stories can come from great pitches, and I get press releases every day. In fact, there are probably more pitches in my inbox from out of my team than there are from my team. So I will say that keep in mind your audience and who you're sending these to. You can't always generate a press release on a personal level, but I will say my contacts in the PR realm here in Southern California have grown in the past year and a half that I've been the business editor, because I give them a space. We may not do a full story on your client. I get this a lot. Here's the pitch. I have a guy who's been added to a team in Irvine to run a particular swath of real estate investment for the region. Would you be interested in interviewing him? I can't interview him now. I will put him on my roster of people, but I will get the news out that he's been added to this team, and that way people in our readership will know, oh, they keep up with the promotions and the expansions of local companies that way. But that also builds a relationship with that PR representative who now will understand that when she sends me something, she'll preface the press release with a personal greeting that says, hey, this is interesting and very much about Orange County. This guy grew up here. He's gotten a huge promotion in the Bay Area. And yes, he's leaving Orange County, but we think your readers would still love to know that he's not going to be CEO of this, burgeoning company. So yeah, I ran that story too. But it's that personal attention that really catches my attention and makes me say, yeah, we'll do something with this. It may not be a 20-inch story that runs in the paper, but your client will get noticed. So keep in mind, if you really want to make a connection, it takes more time. I understand that, but it will almost always generate some feedback. And I do have times where I tell the pitch sender, not this time, but listen, if you get somebody who is specific to Orange County or even Southern California, remember I have 11 newspapers in my email chain. I will send it along. I will give you a name, find this person, pester this person. They will get to this eventually.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
that does help, and I think based on some of the comments that have been coming in here, we couldn't get to all of the questions, but I think that does help. And obviously, if I can just summarize, having an Orange County hook, trying to have an Orange County hook, having a people component, and understanding that you guys are very busy too.
Absolutely, yes. And for all of you out there, I would say, remember that I'm connected to 11 newspapers. So if you have to use me as a point person, I'm happy to help you find people in our chain. And it even goes all the way up to the Bay Area now, and I have people at the Denver Post who I know as well. So you can always network through us, whether it's through LinkedIn or through our email inbox. So please don't be hesitant to find us. And we're happy to kind of take your pitches and see what we can do with them.
And without objection, Samantha, I'd love to blast out our attendees your email or your contact info, if that would be okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. All right, well, thank you again, Samantha. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and answering our questions and really diving into what it is you all do every day. And, I really can't thank you enough.
Well, thanks for having me, and please keep us in mind in the future. We are a big team here, and we're definitely interested in broadening our reach. So we appreciate the opportunity.
And everyone, Samantha included, have a nice day, and see you next time.